Well, the last order of business this morning is to bring some folks up who have actually experienced lasing events in the flight deck. It's a lot different to have me describe what my experience was like from sitting on a ramp last night over in Leesburg and setting up a thing with Patrick. It's much different than actually hearing firsthand from the operators and getting a very, very intimate depiction of what they experienced, how they reacted, and I'm very, very happy that we could have these folks join us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of these speakers, and as I call out your name, I'm going to ask you to come join me up here. See, Tina put the names out there, and then we'll have you join us, have a few words, and then we'll invite you to answer some questions. First up is Captain Robert Hamilton, flies for one of our regional airlines. Next is Captain Henry Cisneros and First Officer Drew Wilkens. Henry and Drew also fly for regional airlines, and they're members of a flight crew which recently suffered a laser attack. Kurt Frisz is going to join us next, and he is the president of the Airborne Law Enforcement Association. Robert Evans. Robert is a master police officer for Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department in the Helicopter Division. And finally, John Debonis. Officer Debonis is a police officer assigned to the Fairfax County Police Department's Helicopters Division. So what I'll probably do is, just to make it easy, I'll start work from left to right, and I'll invite you gentlemen here to make some statements.
I'd like to thank everyone for allowing us to come up and talk to you today about our experience back in January of 2010. We had a little laser incident, and I'd like to talk to you about that right now. Before we get started, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what happens behind the closed door. It's a little bit of a mystery for some, and what we do in preparation for landing.
The approach and landing really has about 4 different phases. We have the arrival section, the actual approach, the landing, which is the touchdown, and then the part afterwards, the taxi, where we'll bring you safely back to the gate. In the arrival phase, we have arrival procedures that are constructed to bring arriving aircraft into an approach to the airplane, kind of funnel them in. We'll use a radio beacon, or we'll use GPS navigation to accomplish this. So imagine a large freeway with a large city with a bunch of freeways bringing traffic in to the airport. It's a very, very busy time for us as pilots. We're looking at our instruments. We're trying to achieve a lot of goals, meeting altitude and airspeed restrictions, and preparing the aircraft and the operation for the approach phase. In the actual approach phase, if you can imagine a funnel that will be leading airplanes into a runway, that's what we're doing. We're basically trying to fly down the center of a funnel, if you want to look at it that way. Again, we use a radio beacon on the ground to bring us in, or GPS navigation. And again, another very busy time for pilots, concentrating on what we're doing. We're flying the airplane, we're monitoring our instruments, we're making corrections as necessary. We're communicating with air traffic control, and typically the radio is alive with instructions from air traffic controllers and responses from pilots. We're also at this time preparing for the actual landing and touchdown of the airplane. In the landing phase, it's a very, again, another busy, highly concentrated time for pilots. We're going to be, at this point, we're going to be making the transition from flying on the instruments, looking in the cockpit, to actually looking out for the runway and the runway environment and making a safe touchdown. Then we come to the taxi phase. After a safe touchdown, we're going to be taxiing the aircraft to the gate. It can be one of the most challenging times. There's, again, a lot of things happening. A lot of radio calls, a lot of procedures in the cockpits. Times when we don't want to be distracted. For example, after landing, we are oftentimes requested to stop before crossing a runway that may be next to us. and it's a very, very critical time. We don't want to be crossing a runway that might be next to the runway we landed on. We could have another airplane taking off or landing in that particular runway. Some airports are very complex, have very complex markings and lightings on the taxiways and runways. Again, something that really requires a lot of concentration and focus on our end. And of course, we're communicating with air traffic control the whole time, and we're reconfiguring the airplane, raising our flaps, turning off our thrust reversers, things like that.
We were operating Continental Express Flight 3104 on January 15, 2010. Our departure airport was Charleston, West Virginia, and we were heading to Houston Intercontinental Airport. The aircraft was an Embraer 145 regional jet, operated by ExpressJet. I was the pilot flying, and Captain Cisneros was the pilot monitoring. Pilot flying has basically one duty, and that's to fly the airplane, whether manually with physical strength or through the use of autopilot. The pilot monitoring is not somebody that's just sitting back and relaxing. It's a very difficult job at times. Involves many duties, including but not limited to making radio calls, running checklists, checking weather, and backing up the pilot flying. At the time of arrival, it was 8:05 p.m. It had been dark for several hours. The weather that particular night, overcast skies, light rain, and winds were out of the east, 10 to 15 miles per hour. We were on approach to 8 left in Houston. It was a typical approach. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. At this point, we were just mainly focusing on the instruments, making sure that the airplane was flying the approach correctly. Then all of a sudden, a bright green flash off the right side of the airplane. I was immediately startled. It was something that I did not expect at all, and it was very distracting. So I looked out the window, which was my first reaction, and I spotted the laser on the ground, and it was moving around in the air, and I could see on the ground about where it was. We're pretty familiar with the area. Houston was our base, so I was able to find the location by seeing the interstate, and that it was coming from an L-shaped shopping center near the interstate. And as I was watching that laser beam move through the air, it flash blinded me instantly. It caught my right eye, and later on we looked on Google Maps to see if we could locate exactly where it came from. So you can see here, here's a picture of an aerial view of Houston Airport and the approach corridor. And in the green circle is about where we thought it was. Zooming in, you can see the L-shaped shopping area, and in that blue bubble, it's a movie theater. And in that parking lot is where the green laser came from. So what could we see when we got hit with the laser? Well, it kind of looked like this. But obviously, as you saw today, that it was much more intense. I couldn't see anything but green. The laser lit up the whole flight deck. Our ability to see well at night was pretty much gone. So what do? Basically, when I got hit with the laser, I immediately closed my eyes and looked away in reaction to that. Captain Cisneros informed air traffic control of the laser incident and where we thought about where it was. We couldn't tell exactly, but we gave them some ground references in order to get law enforcement involved. And then, were we okay? Captain Cisneros, he asked me, can you see? Are you all right? Are you hurt? Can we continue the approach? Do we need to go around? The effects of being hit with the laser, it's not just a bright light. I had a burning and warm sensation in my eye, which I'll talk a little bit later. And then the emotional effects. You know, am I going to be okay? Is this going to affect my career? You know, am I going to be able to continue flying? And then that fear turned into anger. Well, you know, why would somebody do something like this? You know, what are they trying to accomplish? After giving a welfare check of ourselves, we were able to land the aircraft without further incident. Taxiing the terminal, my eye began to feel warm. It had a burning sensation and almost felt like it had sand in it. At that point, we made the decision to call a company to have paramedics meet the aircraft and check me out. And the warm and burning sensation of the tissue around my eye may have been caused by me rubbing it, which we find out that you don't really want to do that. The paramedics checked me out, and really wasn't any damage. They couldn't see anything, and they suggested that I go see an optometrist. But my vision seemed normal. My only concern was the warmness, and I decided that I could see well enough. There weren't any long-lasting effects, so I was able to I was fit to fly, and was able to continue with the rest of the trip.
I'd like to share a couple of my observations and experiences in this event. As Drew said, when the laser actually hit the cockpit, it lit up the whole cockpit. It hit it once, and it was this bright flash, and it surprised the heck out of me. I go, what is this? And then I remembered, this is my second time. It's happened to me twice already, twice within the span of 3 months. Then the laser hits the cockpit again. And the windscreen, or the window in front of me, which is kind of flat, and it's about so big, it turns bright green and absolutely opaque. You cannot see through it, and it's like a giant flashbulb going off in your face. And now, do we want a flashbulb going off in our face when we're trying to land an airplane at night? Absolutely not. It's the worst thing that can happen to you at that point. I was very startled, and I was very angry. I was absolutely furious, because this is, like I say, the second time. And as First Officer Wilkens says, I'm wondering, why would somebody be doing this to us? And I turned my attention to my friend Drew. And now I'm asking myself, my God, is he hurt? We're talking about it. He's telling me, I can see okay. Everything's okay. I ask him, can we continue? He tells me we can continue. And now I'm scared for him. I'm scared, are we going to have an injury? As a captain of the flight, I am responsible for the safety and conduct of that flight, bring that airplane safely to its destination with all of its passengers, crew members, and of course the aircraft. And now I'm scared to death. I'm thinking this could be really bad. And thank God the end result is that we had a minor injury to First Officer Wilkens, and we had a good outcome. Things could have gone very different for us. The emotion that I felt in the cockpit and the flight deck and what we were going through was a tremendous distraction. Distractions are very dangerous, especially during this part of the flight. The FAA has said that these distractions are so dangerous that they have mandated that pilots be trained in the effects of realistic distractions, from the student pilot and the private pilot all the way to the airline pilot. This is a part of our training. Distractions are very dangerous. What could go wrong? Well, a normal everyday flight, we're bringing an airplane into land. Everything is routine. We're hit by a laser, and now we're distracted. We're talking about it, we're analyzing the situation, we're evaluating the threats. During this time when we're distracted, let's say our radio navigation system fails, or we have a mechanical problem with the airplane, or maybe the radio beacon we're using on the ground to home into the airport goes out on us. And let's say now we're off course. Or maybe we're too high, or we're too low, or the airplane's too slow. While we're trying to figure out, hey, are we going to be okay? Can we see to land the airplane? Okay, so these distractions, I cannot I cannot emphasize strongly enough what a danger this is. Also, when these events tend to happen, they generally happen during the landing, sometimes happen on the takeoff. In the case of law enforcement, oftentimes they'll happen during patrols or during flight over a scene in a helicopter. Oftentimes, flying at night, as pilots, we are tired and sometimes fatigued. Imagine a flight crew flying in from overseas somewhere, Middle East, Japan, Europe. They've been in the air for 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. They're coming into land. So are they at their best? Are they at their sharpest? Is this the best time to handle distraction? Probably not. We really don't need those kind of distractions. And again, these events are definitely more common than you would think. It happened to me twice. What are the chances? And there's just a couple of notes that were put up as advisories by the FAA to let pilots know that these events happen. And those are my two events right there. I'm going to finish up.
What we'd like to say is that these laser illuminations are unnecessary distractions. It's a real and it's a growing problem. And it has possible deadly consequences, and it needs to stop now. Thank you.
Hey, Robert, you're up. Get this out of your way.
Good morning, everyone. I have to say, as I look around this room, not being a public speaker and seeing so many distinguished guests, so many eminent ladies and gentlemen in this room of their field, if you'll pardon my use of a biblical reference, I do feel a tad bit like a lion in a den of Daniels. But I truly am honored to be here. I want to take a brief moment before I get started with things to thank the Air Transport Association, ALPA, and PSA Airlines. They have organized, trained, and equipped me to be here today, and their efforts have not gone unnoticed. I've been asked to speak today about the laser effects, or the laser illumination on the flight deck. I've been illuminated 2 times in my life, and I hope that that is it for the remainder of my career. Laser illumination is the act of a person on the ground trying to illuminate an aircraft in hopes of seeing it. In late 2005, I found myself in an FBI vehicle riding around Detroit. Just to be clear, I was in the front seat, though. The special agent who had contacted me upon my arrival had asked me a series of questions about the laser illumination that I had just experienced, and they understood the dangers of it. And after a quick check to ensure that I was okay, they made arrangements for me to take a drive with him the next evening. We went driving around a neighborhood in Detroit looking for a landmark that might give the agents an idea of where the laser had originated. As we drove around, he told me that they had had multiple illuminations from this particular neighborhood, including 17 in one night. At that time, I was flying a Twin Commander Part 135 single pilot. For those of you who may not necessarily be familiar with those terms, Part 135 means that it's on-demand flying for hire. I was hauling cancel checks and medical testing samples. The aircraft itself was roughly 5,000 pounds and at a cruise airspeed of about 200 miles per hour. I was flying solo during this particular flight. As I was descending below an overcast layer of clouds in Detroit Metropolitan Airport, I noticed to the left of my aircraft, about 2 miles away, a red laser illuminating the aircraft. On this particular night, the laser illuminated the entire flight deck and followed me for around 45 seconds. I was temporarily blinded while an attempt to land was being made. This means that I could not clearly see while I should have been completing flows, checklist, lowering flaps, landing gear, and making constant power changes and configuring the aircraft and the descent gradient while visually scanning the aircraft's instruments to ensure that I was within all of the proper parameters necessary for the safety of myself and those below me. All of this in an aircraft with 1960s ergonomics. Needless to say, it was a bit overwhelming, and the safety of this flight was greatly impacted. I tried to recall training from this distraction for temporary blindness, but very few resources were available at this time. The natural response would have been to hand over the flight controls to someone who was not temporarily experiencing the detriments of a laser illumination, but I was flying single pilot. Many of our friends in general aviation community face this same dilemma. Impacted, distracted, and no one to turn the flight controls over to. The dangers cannot be overemphasized. Likewise, just recently, September 3rd, 2011, I was flying from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a non-flying pilot on a CRJ 700, known as a Canadair regional jet. It seats approximately 70 passengers and must operate with 4 crew members, a captain, first officer, and 2 flight attendants. It has a cruise altitude of 41,000 feet and a cruise speed of Mach 0.0. I was the captain on this particular flight. During the approach to runway 23 at Charlotte Douglas International Airport on about a 7-mile final, I noticed a flash to the left of the aircraft. When I looked to see what it was, I was looking into a green laser. I told my first officer that we had just been lasered, and he replied, "Is that what that was?" He then indicated that he had been impacted as well. We were trailed for about the next 45 seconds. When we landed, we were both very uncomfortable. Our vision had been impaired and concerns immediately surfaced. I called our chief pilot to determine which medical facilities were the best options. Needless to say, PSA was sincere and immediate in their response and wanted to ensure that we were safe to continue our flight assignments. After about an hour and a half, I slowly began to see the effects of my laser illumination dwindle. The flight was my first officer's last trip, and so he went home to recover. Ladies and gentlemen, laser illumination from a distance of about 5 miles away from the aircraft, or was about 5 miles away from the aircraft that we were at. We were greater than 4,000 feet above the ground. During my twin commander experience, I was 2 miles from the point of illumination and roughly 2,500 feet above the ground. To some, this will seem like a great distance, but among my fellow pilots, this is the final moments of one of the most critical phases of flight. We are all struggling with questions here today. For my fellow pilots, it's how do we ensure that moms, dads, and children arrive home safely amid this growing threat? Those of you in law enforcement, did they understand what they were doing? Did they have an idea of what this would cause? Does an aircraft in the sky create too tempting of a target? How do we investigate such a large area to look from? For those in the legislative and regulatory, how do we craft the legislation and regulation and then get it through to where that it's effective? But for those in the media, I also say that there's a very important role, and that is raising awareness. Case in point, as surreal as this may seem, my wife was talking to a good neighbor friend of ours and sharing that I was going to be out of town about the time that they were wanting to get together because I had been tasked with speaking at this laser illumination conference and the havoc that it causes on the flight deck. Her husband inquired about what this was, and my wife told him of my experience and that how I had almost lost my life. He stood rock still and replied, "I didn't know that. I won't do it again." My wife was floored and shocked and responded in only a way that my wife can, "You better, and I know where you live." In a nutshell, I was too close to the ground in both events. During both incidents, someone chose to illuminate my flight deck with a laser. This is an extreme and real danger that pilots face, and I am thankful that laser illumination has made the agenda. I look forward to seeing my fellow pilots better equipped to handle this real danger. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much. What we're going to do is shift gears a little bit. We've heard the perspective from the commercial side of the house. Now I'm going to look over to my right, and we're going to get a little bit of different take on things from our law enforcement side of our community. Starting with Kurt, please.
Well, I'd like to thank the Airline Pilots Association for hosting this forum and inviting and involving airborne law enforcement. It's equally a very important issue for us, as you've heard from everybody. It always reverts back to law enforcement and trying to capture the people doing this and then take it into the prosecution and into the court system. And getting that legislation is important to all of us. Just a little bit about ALEA, the Airborne Law Enforcement Association. For those of you who don't know, we're founded in 1968, about 3,500 members strong. We are an education association, not for profit. Our goals are to promote the successful and safe completion of every mission that law enforcement flies. Okay, our members are out there every day, being the officers in the sky, being that patrol car in the sky. So oftentimes we get the radio call for the airliners that have been struck by a laser, and they ask us to go out and search for them. So with that, we're putting ourselves in a unique situation to be struck by a laser. And as mentioned previously, the unique shapes and the dynamics of the helicopters with the bubble in the front, the large windscreens on the doors, there's a lot more potential for the illumination of the cockpit in a helicopter. We inherently fly low and slow. And we desperately want to capture these people that are doing these to everybody, whether it's an airplane on final approach into an international airport, or many times while our members are out on patrol getting struck by a laser. But either way, we're out searching for them, because once we get struck by a laser, and once we obviously the mission safety is number one, we try to locate them. One of the things that's been mentioned a couple times here is education. And one of the things that I guarantee every one of our members in the association is doing is trying to educate the ground officers on the importance and the dynamics of the laser strikes and how critical it is to the flight crew. So we have to we're educating our officers about what they can do, what measures need to be taken. We'll stay in the air and support them, try to guide them to the suspect or the subject that we saw on the ground. If they can locate them for us and seize the laser, get an interview, get a statement, take them into custody, and then we're dealing with the different levels of legislation, whether it's going to be a local prosecution or hopefully eventually a federal prosecution. Different levels of success from around the country. ALEA hosts 6 regional safety seminars a year, and at every safety seminar we hear is more and more conversations about laser strikes. And our members are just like the airline pilots, are getting struck almost on a daily basis. And the success of prosecution throughout the country is not equal, that's for sure. So I think the House Bill 386 that was presented would certainly, we fully support that. In 2007, the ALEA Board of Directors supported, backed by the AOPA, drafted a resolution titled Illumination of Aircraft by Intense Light. In the end, the resolution supports the imposition of criminal sanctions upon those who engage in the practice of illuminating aircraft with a light source sufficient to impair an aircraft's operator's ability to control said aircraft, whose purpose is to do so. I think it's the resolution. It was drafted in 2007. We know they used it in Texas to draft new legislation to prosecute these folks doing this. So with that, the Airborne Law Enforcement Association certainly fully supports the House bill that's 386 that's on the floor. And you're about to hear from some of my counterparts from here in Virginia that are going to tell you some firsthand experience from the cockpit of a law enforcement helicopter. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kurt. So moving right along, we're going to have officers Debonis and Evans join us up here together because they're going to be working off the same presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to thank the association for asking us to be here this morning, for inviting us to share this event with you all and let you know what took place in our county back in 2010. When I begin here, I want to give a brief history of our division. We are currently the only helicopter operating in Northern Virginia on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365 days a year basis. Although we work primarily in Fairfax County, we also serve other jurisdictions throughout Northern Virginia, and very seldom do we ever deny assistance to another agency. And if so, it's always because of a weather situation or a previous mission in our county. Our division was founded in 1983. We're a dual mission helicopter. We fly medevacs and we fly police missions. Our primary, the most missions we fly are primary police missions. The current aircraft that we use is a Bell 407. We had 2 Bell 407s until recently. One was sold in anticipation of 2 new aircraft coming, one of which we're scheduled to take delivery around the 2nd, 3rd week of November. It's going to be a Bell 429. The division staff consists of a division commander, a chief paramedic, a chief pilot, and then we have 10 flight officers / medics, and all the flight officers are sworn police officers, and they're also cross-trained as paramedics. They're nationally registered paramedics. We have 5 pilots, 1 police officer, and 4 civilian pilots. The current flight statistics for this year thus far, we've flown about over 1,400 missions. We've done about 65 medevacs and about 680 flight hours. For 2010, we did 1,974 missions, 81 medevacs, and over 1,000 flight hours. At the time of the event, the flight crew that was involved was myself. Our pilot that night was Mr. Charles Angle. Mr. Angle was 10 years. He had 10 years with the division. He's since retired, and he's enjoying his retirement down in South Carolina, fishing, I believe, a whole bunch. Mr. Angle served in Vietnam and in Desert Storm, so he's a very seasoned pilot. The flight medic for the night was Master Police Officer Evans, who's going to be speaking to you here in a minute. The event took place within our county. We were returning from a previous mission, and as we were returning from that mission, flying over the county, we were lased with a green laser. We were at about 1,200 feet above the ground. The laser came from a distance into the aircraft of about a mile away. So once we saw the laser hit the aircraft, the next thing was where did that come from? Let's see if we can find that. The effects of the laser strike on the aircraft at the time to the pilot. Our pilot, we all fly with NVGs at night. The entire crew has NVG goggles. We all had them that night. Pilot Angle had his down and in position. His were active. Mine were not. Mine were in the raised position, so I took the full force of the hit. I was seated in the left front of the aircraft, and Officer Evans was seated in the left rear of the aircraft. He also had night vision goggles on that night, but they were not in position. Pilot Angle, with his goggles in position, didn't have much of an effect from the strike of the laser. Myself, the effect to me was as the previous gentleman spoke with the slide of the green, and the entire screen was green. That's pretty much what it looked like. It was like a green strobe on a camera. It just illuminated the entire cockpit. And if any of you are familiar with the Bell 407, you know that there's a lot of glass in the front of it. There's glass underneath of it. So it just illuminated the entire aircraft, and it was a blinding effect. It really took away your night vision. It took away all vision to see any instrumentation or anything for myself. For Officer Evans, who was in the rear of the aircraft, he didn't have an immediate effect from the strike, but he did notice that the front of the aircraft was totally illuminated, with the front of the aircraft becoming totally green. Of course, the concern for this particular event is that we are a single pilot operation, so we only have one pilot. I myself, who fly in the left front, do not have controls and am not a pilot. So if our pilot would be incapacitated by the strike of the laser, we'd pretty much be in a bad way. After the laser strike, we worked on finding where it came from. Officer Evans was able to notice that this laser emanated from a place in the county that didn't have any residential houses or anything around. It came from a dark area of the county. So he was able to keep that in his vision and also deploy what we fly with at the time was an Westcam MX-15 camera, which is a FLIR camera, infrared camera. He was able to deploy the camera, and from a distance of about a mile away, as we immediately got hit, he was able to home in on where the strike came from. We found some subjects in that area who seemed to be hanging out. We kept them in the camera as we made our way in the aircraft over to that area. Once overhead of the area, then I was able to use a moving map. We have an AeroComputer moving map system that works similar to a GPS. I was able to take the position of that, radio to ground units to the position of the subjects, and get some ground units started there. The subjects left the area on foot and in a vehicle. We followed the vehicle. The vehicle ultimately ended up at a residence in the county. We were able to get patrol units to go to that residence, make contact with the subjects, and through some investigation they determined that which one was responsible and found the laser that the person had used to commit the lasing. The subject was ultimately charged with Virginia Code and was prosecuted. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Officer Evans. He's going to talk to you about some difficulties in the apprehension of the subjects and some of the prosecution problems involved with it.
Good morning, everyone. Besides the event that occurred that Officer Debonis and I experienced along with our pilot, Mr. Engel, there were 3 other documented incidents of lasing involving our aircraft in 2010. The first one occurred in February. It was early morning hours, so it was still dark outside. The flight crew reported getting hit by a green laser several times. Crew members experienced visual disturbances during the flight, but after a few moments those cleared. They felt it was safe enough to continue with the flight. The flight medic, who was in the back of the aircraft working a forward-looking infrared camera, was able to locate the suspects. Again, using the camera and the AeroComputer, as Officer Debonis explained earlier, the flight officer was able to direct ground officers to the location of the suspects, and the suspects were identified. They were charged, again, under the state criminal code in Virginia for interfering with aircraft operations. And is there anything else in that? No. The second incident in 2010 occurred in October. Again, this was in the late evening this time. It was prior to midnight. The flight crew involved, again, reported getting numerous hits from a green laser while in flight. The flight medic, again, being successful, was able to locate the suspects with the infrared camera. Again, we were able to coordinate with our ground officers, locate the suspects, identify them. In this case, it turned out that it was a bunch of juveniles who didn't really know what they were doing was against the law, and they were educated by the ground officers about that. They were not prosecuted in that one. The third incident also occurred in October of 2010. It was also late at night. This one didn't involve a laser. Officer Debonis was involved in this one. It actually involved a high-powered light. Both Officer Debonis and the pilot advised that they experienced a temporary blindness from the light. But then Officer Debonis was able to locate the subject using his night vision goggles, and they were able to coordinate with ground troops to get the suspect identified. It turned out this subject was actually standing on the roof of his residence using a high-powered light to interfere with our operations. Again, this subject was prosecuted in the state of Virginia under the state criminal code for interfering with aircraft operations. Now, it sounds like we're a little bit lucky that we can catch people quite often, but in these incidents, it's while we're up flying and we actually get lased or we get spotlighted, it's really easy for us to find them. These are not the only incidents that we respond on when it comes to lasing. We have been requested several times in the past by air traffic controllers, both at Dulles Airport and Reagan National, which are in our area of operation, to assist with searching for suspects that were involved in lasing aircraft. Sometimes due to the response time or the report of the incident and the time we do respond, and also the area that we're going to have to search, it takes a little bit longer. Sometimes we're not as successful as when we get a direct hit, but we do our best. Some of the concerns we have when we fly, and we do get lased, as John said earlier, we do fly the single pilot, single flight control for most times. Some of the decisions we have to make if we decide to search for the suspects is the safety of the crew first. If none of us are experiencing ill effects from the first lasing, we have to decide, should we risk getting injured or getting additional injuries if we've experienced one from searching the area for the suspects. Another thing we have to worry about is our flight safety. If our pilot gets lased, can he still control the aircraft? Is he having problems? What is the risk if something happens to the aircraft, to people on the ground? These are things we have to think about. I mean, just like the pilot said earlier today, when you get lased, you get a little angry, you want to find the person. We're police officers. We like to lock people up. We like to see them charged for the crimes they've committed. We like to go after people too, but we do have to think about our safety, the safety of the people on the ground too while we're doing that. Some of the difficulties we've experienced in the past with prosecuting, a lot of it stems with our officers not realizing that there is a state law about interfering with aircraft operations in the state of Virginia. At the time of our event in 2010, the Criminal Code of Virginia declared us a Class 6 felony. It was punishable by 1 to 5 years of imprisonment and up to a $2,500 fine. I was recently told I believe that the fine has gone up this year. I'm not sure about that. Some of the other difficulties we have with prosecution, some of our officers don't understand the severity of the injuries that could occur to us during the flight. They also don't understand the severity of if this happened to an airliner and we're up there trying to find the subject and we find them and we want to prosecute them, the good points that could come out of that. What we do to try to help out with those difficulties real quickly, we attend numerous roll calls with our patrol officers throughout the year. We educate them on some of the events we've gone on, show them videos of apprehensions, explain to them about the state law, about interfering with aircraft operations. We invite all of our ground officers to come up and participate in a ride-along program, and then when our officers are promoted to supervisor, it's part of their training to come up and ride with us. And the other thing we like to do is we like to include our department's public information office when we do make apprehensions on these type of events, have them issue press releases so it gets out to the public that if you do these things, you're going to get caught, and if you do get caught, you're going to get prosecuted. Thank you for your time.